so let's do one more thing, because this is kind of my last argument. So this is the Money Guy show. Now, I do actually kind of like these guys, but this is how everything we've just talked about permeates through the financial markets and through thinking with finance.
I was going to say, in general, I've liked a lot of the stuff that I've seen from these folks. So let's see.
Yeah, they're great guys, but the problem is they still have to defend this because it's how they make their money. So it they're pushed into a dark corner here.
So when you say that they have to defend it, before we watch this, let's clarify that.
Sure.
You're saying they have to defend it because what they are selling requires that the system be merit-based and requires that it not necessarily be circumstantial or luck-based, or right? Is that
right? Because
what you're saying?
They want to suck up to Dave. They want to get bleed off from his audience. They have their own little, whatever it is, 5-point plan, just like Dave does his 7-point plan. And they can't acknowledge the situation of, well, this is a circumstantial issue, because what they're really targeting is we're targeting middle class and upper middle class people. So we have to sell them that, no, you're there because of merit, that merit is what makes this happen. And that if we say, well, it's not, then any plan, their little 5-point plan, goes to nothing. Right?
It loses a certain amount of credibility. I mean, it still might be a reasonable plan, but it loses a certain amount of its clout and credibility if more of it gets chalked up to chance or circumstance or luck rather than merit and hard work. And by the way, hard work looks like my plan that you're buying.
Well, but that's the point, is it is all circumstance. The plan itself is not any good. It's not that remarkable. We went through that with them before. It's not interesting or remarkable. What's happening here is, if you're making a lot of money, I don't even have to have a good plan. I just have to have a plan that's not completely stupid. And you'll make money, and then I can take credit for it. But did I actually help you? Probably not.
All right. Well,
but I can't sell that, can I? Right?
No. All right. Let's see what these guys have to say.
Preston, the money guy.
Dave Ramsey's a freaking moron. But he's a genius for poor people who don't have discipline.
If you don't want to become wealthy, follow Dave Ramsey.
If you just want to save your money and die poor, and you have no self-discipline, be poor. Follow Dave Ramsey and be poor. And the reason I say that is he says pay cash for everything, don't have any debt, and that's what I grew up with. Like, if you can pay off your house, can you imagine paying off your house and not having a mortgage payment? That's the stupidest thing you could ever do. Can you imagine paying cash for a car? How cool would it be to pay? No, that's terrible. It's a terrible financial decision.
We're in this society now where it seems like extremes rule
that's all
everything.
There is, yeah.
That's all that's on air. That's all that seems that works. But that's not the reality of life. I mean, I will say Dave is definitely on one side of, hey, let's get rid of all the debt as fast as possible. But then I would say they're on the other side, which is saying, never pay off your debt. Take advantage of the low interest rates and go invest it, and you'll...
So they didn't say that. Did they say never pay off your debt?
No, but I'm going to be honest. I can see why that is the assumption that they are drawing, because the manner in which they said what they did say does sound like they're, promoting keeping those loans.
No, they're not.
That is how it sounded to me, although that was not what they said.
They're not. No. They're saying to pay. At no point did they say get debt and just don't pay it off. They didn't say that. That was never even implied. They said it's.
I think we should rewind it. I think. I don't think they'd never pay it off, but they did make comments about it not being smart.
Well, no. His argument was they're saying don't pay it off. So we'll go back. Let's watch it again.
Freaking moron. But he's a genius for poor people who don't have discipline.
If you don't want to become wealthy, follow Dave Ramsey.
If you just want to save your money and die poor, and you have no self-discipline, be poor. Follow Dave Ramsey and be poor. And the reason I say that is he says pay cash for everything, don't have any debt, and that's what I grew up with. Like if you can pay off your house, can you imagine paying off your house and not having a mortgage payment? That's the stupidest thing you could ever do. Can you imagine paying cash for a car? How cool would it be to pay? No, that's terrible. It's a terrible financial decision.
We're in this society now where it seems like extremes rule
That's all there
everything.
is, yeah.
That's all that's on air. That's all that seems that works. But that's not the reality of life. I mean, I will say Dave is definitely on one side of, hey, let's get rid of all the debt as fast as possible. But then I would say they're on the other side, which is saying never pay off your debt. Take advantage of the low interest rates and go invest it, and you'll have the best life ever.
Yeah,
So, okay,
they're not saying
the
don't pay off your
TikTok
debt.
the TikTok guy did say that was a terrible financial decision to go and pay that off. That is what he said.
He's saying it all at once.
Now, the premise that I mean, the money guys are reading way more into what these guys said than what they really said.
Right, because they have to.
But I am just saying that I understand where at least where their launch pad is, because on TikTok that guy did say that's a terrible financial decision.
Right, to take all your cash and pay off your debt is a terrible decision. That was what he said.
Right, but that is where he started from. And he
No.
didn't say take all your cash. He never used the words take all your cash. He just said that's a terrible financial decision. He didn't say which part of it was.
But he said, well, Dave's thing was pay off all your debt. And he said that was a terrible decision.
Correct.
Just to pay it all off at once. As
Yes,
opposed
but the TikTok guy, he did not say take all your cash.
No,
If we're really gonna say, analyze what he really said versus what he didn't say, he also didn't say take all your cash.
well, fair enough.
In all
But
fairness.
the bottom line is if you're poor, if you take your cash and you pay off the debt, you're at higher risk. We've gone through this multiple times. You put these people in horrible situations, right? Because they paid off their.
I'm not disagreeing with you there. I'm just disagreeing. The TikTok guy didn't say take all your cash.
No.
Dave Ramsey did. The TikTok guy did not say that.
Yeah, but we know what Dave Ramsey would say. I'm just that would be my counter. But anyway, let's just finish this real quick. And
They're both on these different sides. I'm telling you, the answer is actually understanding how risk works, how growth of assets works, understanding the difference between building wealth and keeping wealth, because there's a balance there in the journey where it will change. In the beginning, yes, you should be aggressive. So that falls into what they're saying, probably counter to what Dave is saying, because he's focusing on the discipline versus the wealth building, or debt payment versus wealth building. But then I think as you get older, it falls more on the Dave side of things, is that to keep your wealth, you better not owe a lot of people money. You better not be too far out on the risk spectrum. It's balanced in the middle, and neither one of them are right.
There are multiple paths.
so this is where I kind of wanted to kick that one real quick. Is they skip right past it, because the real issue is they said if you're poor and you want to stay poor, follow Dave's plan. Take all your money, throw it at the debt. You're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to save anything. Why? Because you don't make that much money. And the guy is 100% right in the TikTok video on that one. What they're ignoring is they're looking at it from, well, I mean, if you're middle or upper middle class, well, it just blah, blah, blah. But they have to suck up to Dave on this one. They can't acknowledge the reality. And that was what bothers me, is they misrepresent what was said, what the actual argument was, and the kind of person we're talking about. Because he said, if you're poor multiple times and you want to stay poor, that's the situation. But they don't acknowledge that. They skip right past it and go, well, but when you're older and you're rich, if you're rich, this is the problem. I've been a financial planner for 10 years, and this is what's always bugged me about my profession. I make my money on fees, mostly, and commissions. Okay? If you invest $1,000 with me and I'm charging you 1%, I make $10 that year. If you invest $1 million with me, I make $10,000 that year. You know what the difference is? A couple zeros. It's the same, pretty much the same amount of work. So if you only have 1,000, you're not worth my time. You're basically paying me pennies an hour to do the work somebody else is going to pay me $300 or $400, $500 an hour to do because they have more money. It's changed the situation. And that's the problem that bothers me here is when you sit there and go, well, let's just tell the poor this shit. Let's just tell the lower class this shit. It doesn't solve any of the problems. And they certainly can't afford somebody like me. And as much as I would, I'd like to help them, the bottom line is I gotta get paid. I got bills.
Right. You're in a situation where you can't afford to help people that are making under a certain amount.
Right. And they can't sit there and say that because they're trying to get the bleed off from Dave's audience. They're trying to make money. So, just to go back through Worthington's Law and that concept of wealth equals better than. It's not a real thing. I always think about this when I was in political science, when I was younger. Margaret Thatcher, for those guys you don't know, she was the Prime Minister of England for like 17 years, for a long time, 18 years, something like that. I have a little stats here. During her time period, pensions got pretty much demolished. The pensioners were hit. So a lot of elderly people ended up being thrown into poverty. People living below the poverty line in England during her time when she started was 13%. By the time she finished was 43% of the population. It's a lot. Child poverty doubled, more than doubled.
Well, this is an uplifting ending.
Yeah. So there was a Tory minister named Sir Ian Gilmore, and this is a Tory, this is a conservative, and he described her tenure as the sacrifice imposed on the poor produced nothing miraculous except for the rich. And rich saw their tax rates fall from 83% to 40%. And one of Margaret Thatcher's most famous lines was, "Poverty is a personal defect."
Ugh.
So poverty is because there's something wrong with you. That's the Worthington Law. I'm going to throw you another one. A guy I love, George Orwell. He's a famous author who was incredibly poor for a big portion of his life. And he had a really famous quote. "For when you are approaching poverty, you make one discovery which outweighs all the others. The fact that it annihilates the future." When you have no options and no resources, there is no future. So if you want to start talking about what is it that makes the rich and the poor different, it's resources, it's money. That's what it is. And, you can Google how do you become wealthy or causes of wealth, and you're going to get a million articles about, well, these are the habits of the rich, and this is what they do, and, they all eat, yogurt and eggs for breakfast, and they wear different colored socks, and whatever it is, it's all bullshit. What you really need to think is, the reality is wealth and power are intertwined. If I have the ability to control something, I can control whether or not I'm wealthy. Right? So,
it was good.